You know, one of the biggest problems I face when writing my For Honor Legends is that the For Honor world, as awesome as I find it, isn't very well fleshed out. And what I mean by that is, there are a lot of things within the world of For Honor that we don't know about and hasn't been explained to us because many of us don't think about it when we're focused on the fighting aspect of the game. And it makes sense, but there are some things that I'd love to know about, especially if I'm going to tell stories within this world. For example, we know next to nothing about the Wulin and their society and their culture and their military structure or what their world kind of looked like. Like, can anyone tell me what China looks like right now? Does it still look anything like the original China, or is it all a wasteland? What about Ashfeld? How do the legions work? How do they cooperate? What laws and rules do they have? What governance do they create? Or, Valkenheim. How do the Jarls interact with each other? Are the clans just always in perpetual war? Do they ever work together? Do they have a higher authority? That and many more. All of these questions come up and they can make me struggle when writing stories within the world of For Honor. So, admittedly, what I have to do is sometimes I take liberties. Sometimes I create little nuggets and tidbits of lore to help flesh out the world of For Honor so that I can better tell stories. Now, I try very hard to make sure that the little lore tidbits and liberties I take are ones that do not conflict with anything already established in the world of For Honor. I want to make sure that they run parallel to the existing lore, not against it. You know what I'm saying? So that is something that I've always tried to do. And a lot of people have said, hey, Raven, we think it's kind of cool that you do this. And so while I've been sitting here thinking about all the lore that I've been establishing for the different characters and aspects of For Honor, I thought, you know what? Why keep it to myself? So what I want to do today is share with you guys some of the tidbits of lore that I've created, specifically around the Knights. What I'm going to do is go through each member of the Knight faction and give you a tidbit of lore that I've created for them. Each of these tidbits of lore, I will explain why I added them, and I will tell you how they work within that character slot. And also, I will assure you that each one, as far as I understand, does not conflict with the existing lore. So, if you guys are interested, let's dive into the Knights. First up, Warden. Now, the Warden trailer says that the Wardens are an ancient order fallen into dust, and yet we see plenty of Wardens in the setting, and we're always getting more. We never seem to run out. Now, what this implies to me is that the Order of the Wardens actually still exists. The Order used to be more prominent, powerful, and numerous with a great deal of austerity, but time and difficulties of initiation had to have ensured the Order could not maintain a large presence and number to stay in such prominence. So, here is my tidbit of lore. The Order of the Wardens still exists and is governed by a council of elders that sit on it to swear in new initiates who are tapped by other Wardens. Part of the reason they do this is because it's difficult to tap new Wardens because of the oaths that they must take. Wardens take oaths not just to fight for peace and for the longevity of Ashfeld, but to protect the weak and the needy of all people, not just Ashfeldians. And not all Knights of Ashfeld could do this. Not all Knights of Ashfeld could swear themselves to such oaths because they hold such vehemence and hatred for outsiders. In order to become a Warden, first you have to prove yourself a capable warrior. Another Warden recognizes this, and then they tap you and recommend you to become an initiate of the Order of the Wardens. They then bring you before the council discusses if they think you're worthy, and then they have you swear in the oaths if they believe you are. This is how I think the Wardens have maintained their presence in Ashfeld and why they're still rare, and yet we still keep seeing them. So that is my tidbit of lore about the Wardens. The Conqueror. The Conquerors are supposedly criminals, right? The trailer tells us that they are conscripted criminals who have had to refill the ranks of the Knights during desperate times. So here's my lore tidbit. The Conquerors are given flails specifically because of how dangerous the flails are to the wielder. It's a reflection of how meaningless their lives are. Simply put, they are to kill and earn their pardon, or they die and nothing of value is lost in the process. Conquerors who prove themselves may be given full pardons and allowed status outside of prison, and may even be allowed to take on new knightly positions, but most don't, as they feel that their time as conquerors is what molded them into effective fighters. Peacekeepers. Ashfeld's greatest fear is not necessarily invasion, but just a descent into chaos, fearing the collapse of the order and structure that they have been trying to build and maintain for so long. They have just as much to fear from internal calamity and dissension as they do from external invasion. So for this reason, Peacekeepers, though being battlefield warriors, work more commonly as internal inquisitors of Ashfeld, ensuring there are no traitors, spies, or insurrections brewing within their homes. They work within the borders of Ashfeld more frequently than outside it. We know this because in the trailer for Peacekeeper, the voice line says that during times of peace, it is the silent blade that keeps the peace. So a Peacekeeper is still active even when there are no wars going on. Why is that? Because they're not just there to fight wars, they're there to make sure that everyone's following the rules, you know what I'm saying? I think that's the little secret of the Peacekeepers. Lawbringers. Now, the trailer for the Lawbringers says that they represent order and law, and you pray that you don't need them, and when they arrive, pray you have done no wrong. The implication here is that Lawbringers carry the highest authority of law, but that begs a question. Why would the other factions care about or adhere to the rules of Ashfeld or laws of Ashfeld? For this reason, I believe that Lawbringers are given the best armor and weapons because they're not just warriors out to slay enemies of Ashfeld, but also enforce the order and discipline within knight legions. Think of them as commissars, ensuring no knight within the legion breaks their oaths or rules of Ashfeld. If a knight is proven to have broken their oaths or the laws of Ashfeld, then they are ordered to dispense punishment upon that knight, and they have the best weapons and armor to do so. In a sense, the Lawbringers are so well equipped and armed, not just because they're going to be out fighting the enemies of Ashfeld, but because they may have to fight deserting or treacherous knights who betray their order. I thought that would be a neat addition to the Lawbringers. It would also add a lot more to Holden Cross, who's a Lawbringer himself, but he recognizes all the bad that Apollyon's doing, but he's finding it difficult to, punish his own leader who he trusted so much, but in the end, he does have to do the right thing. So I thought that'd be an interesting take on the Lawbringers. The Centurion. Now, a lot of people complain that the Centurion doesn't carry a shield like Centurions would. So I made a lore tidbit as to why. The reason Centurions don't carry their scutum shield is because the shield was more than a tool of war, but also a symbol of unity, as the shield was designed to be used amongst a legion or group. You wanted to be amongst others using that shield so that you could form up a line with it. With the empire they once came from broken and fractured, that unity is lost, and the empire is a shadow of its old self. So rather than duck behind a shield of a fallen empire that no longer exists, they strike with a wrathful fist all their own to show people the rage of that empire. Sure, they're fractured and divided, which is why they don't use the shield, because that was a symbol of unity, but they can still strike out with a fist and show the anger of that empire. Gladiator. Now, one thing that I think is kind of funny is Gladiators had a lot of different types of weapons in their repertoire historically, so why bring a trident and buckler shield? Here's my reasoning. When the Gladiators first entered the war, they chose to fight with the trident and buckler because they greatly underestimated the opposition. Since Gladiator fights are usually more controlled and enclosed, they didn't see any reason to think war would be any different. After realizing the real nature of war, they didn't change a damn thing because they continue to fight with these weapons because they feel it's far more impressive to overcome foes with less effective equipment. See, think about it like this. To the Gladiators, at first, it was just a matter of, they're too weak for us to care about. We'll just bring our normal trident and buckler combo. We don't need to bring anything heavier than that. Then when they realized that the enemy was actually way stronger than they thought, they said, okay. We won't change anything up, but now we're changing the context of it. We're doing it because if we can beat these impressive warriors with these lesser tier weapons in comparison, that makes us even better than them by default, and that makes us even cooler. Because for the Gladiators, it's all about looking cool, bro. The Black Priors. Now, this is something that I dove into a bit more in my Black Prior sermon video, so I would definitely give that a watch. It was a fun video to make. In my theory, the Black Priors initially were pious and holy individuals who acted as spiritual guides as well as warriors. They were bastions of Ashfeld's old religion. They followed Apollyon initially because they believed she would be beneficial to the knights, only to discover too late that they were wrong. They go into hiding for a long time in shame and, in penitence, and later, thanks to the teachings of Vortigern and Astria, the priors have abandoned the old ways in favor of their version of dark justice and redemption by the sword. Instead of lying around on their knees and begging for mercy and begging for forgiveness, Vortigern said, no, we're not doing that anymore. We're getting our forgiveness and redemption by way of the sword. We're going to bring destruction and damnation upon the enemies of Ashfeld, and that's how we'll get our forgiveness. However, there are some who still hold fast to the old doctrines of their order, and those priors work in secret against Vortigern and Astria so that they can try to redeem the priors into what they used to be, which is where we get the Sermon of the Black Prior. Warmonger. not all, in fact probably most, warmongers do not follow Astria or Horkos out of blind adherence to her philosophy or ideals, but rather, I would say, out of desperation, obligation, or a combination of both. Here's my theory. The first warmongers were former knights of the Blackstone Legion, or sisters, daughters, and widows of former Blackstone knights who were disgraced or killed. Without any means to support themselves and holding a degree of resentment to their new order in Ashfeld, as well as a disgust for the move for peace among the factions during the Truce of Wyverndale, seeing it as an insult to the Blackstone legacy, many joined Astria for their personal chance at justice, vengeance, and obligation. But over time, more joined out of admiration for Astria, desperation to escape the persecution of Horkos, or because they truly believed in the ideals of Horkos or Apollyon herself. But the idea that all warmongers just all completely agree with and adhere to everything Astria believes is lunacy. There've got to be at least some, if not many, who don't do it because they believe in the ideals of a warring society, but because either they're desperate to get out of the lives they're living, they're trying to avoid Horkos persecution, or they're trying to get their own sense of justice, and this is the best way to do it. And finally, Griffin. Now, hear me out on this. It's going to be a bit of a stretch, but follow me. I believe there are actually more Griffins than just Holden Cross. During his mercenary travels, other warriors were probably inspired by Griffin's choices and deeds and decided to adopt his methods and ideals and fighting styles. The reason all Griffins appear to be Holden Cross in-game, aside from the fact that Ubisoft was lazy and decided not to give us any more designs besides Griffins, I digress, is because the Order remains secretive, and because Holden was the first to carry the title of Griffin in the eyes of all factions, all Griffins carry his face, his shame, and his legacy. So to all of the people of Ashfeld, it doesn't matter if there's more than one Griffin, they're all essentially the same person in their eyes, the same person who carried the same weight of shame and the same legacy as Holden Cross. I know that's a stretch, but it's the best I can do with what they've given because damn, I hate what they did with Griffin. Please, you know how a lot of people like to say we need to ungender lock certain characters? The first one I'm going to say to ungender lock is Griffin, because at least that way we could establish there's more than just Holden Cross among the Griffins. There's a lady amongst them too. Griffin got himself a wife, you know, just something beyond just, oh look, I'm fighting 3 Holden Crosses right now. Jesus. Anyway, those are my lore tidbits for the Knights. I wanted to share these with you guys. What do you guys think? Do you like these little lore tidbits I added? Do you think that there's stuff that For Honor should maybe make canon themselves and add to their wikis or whatever? What do you think? Let me know down in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you want me to continue this and do the other characters and the other factions, I'd love for you to let me know in the comments again, because I may do more of these kind of videos. And as always, I will see you in my next video. Take care.